Now today we're going to leave Objectivity Valley, the place where I like to establish my YouTube channel most of the time, and we're gonna head straight off into Subjectivity Swamp. Does this make any sense? I don't really know if it does, but today we're gonna talk about audio equipment. Now the point of today's video is to compare the onboard audio of a high-end motherboard to an external headphone amplifier DAC. Now the reason that I'm doing this is because there are so many options on Massdrop for fairly reasonably priced headphone amplifiers which promise to give you better audio quality. So today we're going to see whether or not you should actually buy one of these. Now before I get into the video, I want to say that this is not sponsored by Massdrop, although Massdrop, if you are watching this video, hint hint. Now how we're going to go about the tests in this video is, first off, I'm going to do the very subjective thing of talking you through the differences as I hear them, and then at the end we're going to do a blind test. And I got it right this time. I'm not going to call it a double blind test. So basically what's going to happen is Anna's going to blindfold me, and then we're going to see whether or not I can tell a difference between the two. Now the motherboard that I'm going to use for today's test is the Asus X570 Crosshair Hero. Now this motherboard sells for about $360, and according to Asus has a very good audio implementation. And then I'm going to compare it to the Massdrop CTH plus S DAC. Now that's a beautiful name, but this headphone amplifier sells for about $320. Now this headphone DAC is a little bit cheaper than the motherboard, but they are about in the same ballpark of price. Now before we get into the actual kind of sound quality comparisons, let's just do a quick physical breakdown of the two components. Now the CTH plus S DAC is a very well built all metal headphone amplifier thing, which feels very sturdy. All of the buttons have a very satisfying tactile click, and the jack also has a nice kind of thud when you plug in your headphones. Now as far as inputs go, it's just got a micro USB, which I honestly don't like. I would have preferred a USB Type-C because it's a much sturdier connector, and I also would have liked it to have an optical input, but you know, it not having that isn't a huge deal. And then it's also got two sets of RCAs, which means that you can plug an external DAC into it, or like a turntable or something like that. And then on the front of the headphone amplifier, you have the kind of 6.3mm jack, which is the big fat headphone jack. And then you also have a 4-pin XLR, which is like a balanced output. Now this is going to be fairly technical, but I don't know whether or not it's a truly balanced output, because I don't know whether or not the amplifier section or the DAC section of this headphone amplifier DAC is balanced. Because it also doesn't have balanced inputs, it means that it probably isn't. So I don't know how much of a benefit there is going to be using that output over the normal 6.3mm one. What you also would have noticed is that it does have a tube. There is a solid state version of this amplifier, but the tube version is a bit cheaper, and according to audiophiles everywhere, the tube is supposed to give a more analog kind of hint to the sound, so it gives a kind of more warm, realistic tone. Although what it does mean is that it is going to color the sound a little bit, so it's not going to be the most realistic representation of the recording that you're listening to. As far as the motherboard audio goes, it looks like all other motherboard audio. It's just got a couple of 3.5mm jacks on the back, and then it's also got an optical output. Now one of the interesting things to note is that when you go on Asus's website and you actually look at the specifications of the DAC that it uses, it actually supports higher bitrate audio than the DAC in the headphone amplifier that we're using today. The headphone amplifier supports 24-bit by 96 kHz, whereas the DAC on the motherboard supports 32-bit and 192 kHz. Whether or not this matters depends on what audio files you're actually listening to, and honestly, I don't know how many people have that high bitrate music available. Other than that, Asus doesn't have a bunch of measurements for the actual performance of the DAC and the headphone amplifier on the motherboard, whereas Massdrop has a huge list of measurements, which is really useful because it means that you can on paper compare various headphone amplifiers to see which one you think is going to perform better. Now the headphones that I'm going to be using for these tests is my very old and very used Sennheiser HD 650s. Now I've had these headphones for a while and they're very worn in. I absolutely love them. They're basically the same headphones as the Massdrop HD6XXs, and I really would recommend them, especially at the $220 that Massdrop's selling them for. They are amazing headphones. Now, one thing to note about these headphones though is that they're what's called high impedance, which means they're very difficult for the headphone amplifier and DAC to drive. That's one of the reasons why you'd want to buy a headphone amplifier DAC for them. But the Asus motherboard does have a built-in headphone amplifier, so that should help it out a lot. So now with that out of the way, how do they compare to each other? Now for the first about half an hour of comparing songs, I could hear that there was a difference, but I couldn't really put my finger on what it was. And then it started kind of dawning on me. The headphone amplifier to my ear sounds a lot rounder and a lot more realistic. Now I know that's already ridiculous audiophile speak, but it gives you a very realistic representation of what is happening in the recording. And it sounds more like you're listening to actual musicians performing as opposed to listening to a recording over headphones. And then the other big difference to my ear was the small little details in the music. While listening to the headphone amplifier, it would really bring your attention to the small details like a flourish of a backup guitarist or the coughing of an audience member while the performance was happening. And then while listening to the headphone amplifier, you'll think to yourself, whoa, I didn't hear these little details with the motherboard. And then when you switch back to the same song listening to the motherboard and actually listening for those details, you can hear them. They're there, but they don't stand out to you somehow. They don't make themselves as apparent in the mix as they do with the headphone amplifier. And then quickly, just on a side note, before we go into the more concrete objective test, I just want to mention the actual gaming performance. So I used Battlefield 5 to see if I could hear a difference between the two, because Battlefield traditionally has very good audio mixing in their games. And honestly, I couldn't hear much of a difference. You're so busy concentrating on like winning the match and playing properly that the audio is a really important part, but you can't pick apart the like minute differences between the two. Because honestly, this sound quality difference between the headphone amplifier and the motherboard, it's quite small. The headphone amplifier just sprinkles this little bit of magic onto the music. So it's quite difficult to put your finger on what it is, but it really does make a big difference to the overall just realism of the music. And it doesn't really do that with games. Now we just, oh god, I don't have my glasses on. I can't, I can't appear on camera without my glasses on. So we just did a blind test where Anna changed the actual sources while I tried to guess which one was which. And I couldn't tell the difference. Like I got a 50% hit rate, which is the same as guessing. But I was using Spotify at the highest quality, but I was streaming with Spotify, which is still a very compressed file format. And I thought that some people may take issue with that, and you know, I want to believe that this actually makes a difference. So now we're trying Tidal, which you can actually stream at like uncompressed CD quality, which is like proper audio files. So we'll see if that makes any difference and if I can actually tell. So let's take these off, put the blindfold on, and then we're gonna do a control and then, I don't know, 8 tests?
Yeah.
And then see if I can actually tell the difference. Just for the sake of complete transparency, I do want to point out that we did do the test before and I failed fairly miserably.
Okay.
Now, I just want to point out that I was listening to the song a lot over Spotify, and I know that at this point, my opinion doesn't mean much to me, but it sounds a lot better than the Spotify audio did. I feel like Daredevil is sitting here. I feel like I should be more broody and be like really concerned about whether or not I should murder. This one's the motherboard.
Okay. Let's see if that makes sense. Okay, stop.
Oh yeah, like this is the headphone amplifier. Oh, it sounds like Adele sticking her tongue down my ear. Like it's just, it just sounds so good. I don't even care which one it is. It just sounds so good. Okay, do I need to clap? How many do we have left?
1.
No, it's the amplifier.
Okay.
Okay, can I expose my eyes?
You may expose your eyes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my god, how did I do?
So you got 2 wrong.
Oh, okay.
So you got 6 out of 8.
Okay, so this, like the previous test when we were using Spotify, now I know that whether or not uncompressed audio and compressed audio makes a difference is also a debate. But there, I honestly couldn't tell.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell
showed.
at all.
You literally got 50%.
I got 50%. I couldn't tell at all. But here, I genuinely feel like there was a difference between them. Even though I got some wrong, but I really feel...
the ones you got wrong were when
you doubled up.
Was when I doubled it.
So while listening to Tidal recordings of Adele songs, while blindfolded, both Anna and I could tell a difference. Now, this might sound like I'm kind of making excuses here, but the 2 times that I got it wrong was because it was back to back with the DAC. And the reason that I got it wrong there was because every time you switch from the PC audio to the headphone amplifier, there's this, wow, this does sound a lot more realistic and more warm, and it just sounds more pleasant. It almost gives a physical reaction because of how good it sounds. Whereas when it's just the DAC again, you don't have that surprise as to how much better it sounds in the previous one, so then you kind of think it's the motherboard audio again. And I just want to point out that this motherboard does have very, very good built-in audio. So if you have the HD6XXs and you have this motherboard, there's not that much value in going to the headphone amplifier. I'd still recommend it because I think the difference is an important difference. But if you have a worse motherboard with these headphones, I think that you would get a lot more value out of the headphone amplifier. Because the headphone amplifier doesn't have to struggle to drive these headphones, you're gonna have less distortion on the headphone amplifier than you are going to have with a motherboard that has worse built-in audio. Anyway, with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below if you found this kind of video interesting and if you think I should do things like this. If not, tell me just what you thought about the test. And with that, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, do like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. Check out my Instagram, my Twitter, and my Discord. I'll have them linked below. And until the next video, bye-bye.